cursed battlefield, the night sky hung low, clouds swirling like thick curtains of smoke over the forgotten battlefield. Private Logan Taylor stood at the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the barren, wind-swept plain. It was his third night stationed at the old war zone, an outpost left abandoned for decades before their squadron was assigned to it. The history of the place was whispered in hushed tones, with even the most hardened soldiers throwing nervous glances over their shoulders. The war had ended years ago, but the land still reeked of death. Unmarked graves dotted the hills, and remnants of old battle gear lay scattered like skeletons of a forgotten era. Despite the quiet, there was a weight in the air, something unsettling. Logan squinted through the growing fog, his fingers tight around the grip of his rifle. Something was off. For the past few days, strange things had been happening. Bloodstains would appear on the ground in the morning, only to vanish by dusk. Shadows moved without reason, and whispers echoed through the night. Though no one could place their source, his fellow soldiers had chalked it up to paranoia, to the unnerving isolation of their assignment. But Logan felt something dangerous was at play. As Logan turned to head back to his tent, he noticed Private Walker, his closest friend, crouched by a cluster of rocks, staring intently at the groundwalker. Logan called, his voice cutting through the air incessant. "What are you doing over there?" Walker didn't answer immediately. His fingers traced the dirt, his brow furrowed as though he had uncovered something. Logan walked over, his boots crunching the dead grass beneath him. "Logan, look at this," Walker whispered, pointing at the ground. Logan's heart skipped a beat as he saw a fresh pool of blood seeping into the dirt. The soil was soaked, dark red and viscous, yet there was no body, no source. The scent of iron hung in the air, thick and choking. "What the hell?" Logan muttered, crouching beside Walker. The blood shimmered in the moonlight, and as they watched, it began to disappear. Slowly, it was as if the earth itself was swallowing the liquid, leaving behind nothing but dry, cracked dirt. Walker stood, his face pale. "This isn't right, man. It's like the land itself is bleeding." Logan nodded. But before he could speak, a voice called from behind them, "Taylor." Walker. It was Sergeant Davis, his broad frame silhouetted against the fog. "Get back to the camp, now." Both soldiers stood, the unease between them thick as they trudged back to the tents. As they reached the center of the camp, Logan noticed more soldiers had gathered. Their faces were drawn, eyes wide with the same fear that gnawed at his own nerves. "What's going on, Sergeant?" Logan asked. Davis's expression was grim. "I've just spoken with command. They're pulling us out tomorrow." Walker furrowed his brow. "Why? I thought we were supposed to hold this position for another week." Davis hesitated before answering, his gaze shifting toward the fog-covered hills. "There's something wrong with this place. Too many strange things have been happening. Command doesn't want to risk it. They're sending a team to investigate, but we're to leave at first light." Logan exchanged a glance with Walker. The relief he felt at the prospect of leaving was dampened by a gnawing curiosity. Something was haunting this land, and it wasn't just the ghosts of past battles. Later that night, the camp was unusually quiet. Soldiers who would normally crack jokes or complain about rations sat in tense silence. The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it faint whispers that raised the hair on Logan's neck. He lay in his cot, staring at the canvas ceiling of his tent, his heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, bright and violent, like lightning striking the ground. Logan bolted upright, grabbing his rifle as he rushed outside. He wasn't alone. Other soldiers were already outside, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. "Did you see that?" one of them asked, his voice trembling. Another flash illuminated the night, and this time Logan saw it clearly. In the distance, across the battlefield, figures moved. Not just one or two, but dozens, maybe hundreds. They were dressed in old military uniforms, their faces twisted in anguish as they marched forward, stepping over invisible bodies and through the lingering fog. The flashes of light came in rapid succession now, each one illuminating the horrifying scene as though history itself was playing out in front of them. The ghostly soldiers didn't acknowledge the living. They moved with purpose, as if fighting a battle only they could see. Their weapons fired into the darkness, but no sound came from the blasts. It was an army of the dead, forever reliving the final moments of a battle long lost. Logan's breath caught in his throat as one of the ghostly figures stopped and turned toward the camp. Its eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto him, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight. Logan stumbled back, his hands shaking. "We need to leave," someone yelled, but it was too late. The ground beneath them began to rumble. The soldiers scattered, grabbing their gear as the earth shook violently. It was as if the battlefield itself was alive, rebelling against the living who dared to tread upon it. Blood seeped from the ground again, thick and dark, pooling around their feet. Logan ran toward the edge of the camp, his heart racing as screams echoed behind him. He turned just in time to see Private Walker get dragged into the fog by unseen hands. His screams were cut short, replaced by the sound of distant, mournful cries that didn't belong to the living. Panic surged through the camp as soldiers fired blindly into the fog. But the bullets didn't matter. They passed through the ghostly figures as if they were smoke. The dead soldiers continued their relentless march, closing in on the camp with every second. Logan's mind raced. They were trapped, caught in the middle of a cursed battlefield. But why? What had caused this? As he ran toward Sergeant Davis's tent, he remembered the strange bloodstains, the whispers in the wind. Something had cursed this land, trapping the souls of the dead in a never-ending loop of torment. "Sergeant," Logan shouted as he burst into the tent. "We need to find a way out of here." Davis was already on his feet, his face pale but determined. "We're not going to make it out if we don't stop whatever this is." Logan nodded. "There has to be something, some reason why this place is cursed." Davis grabbed a map of the area, spreading it out on the table. The locals mentioned something about an ancient ritual, something about a battle long before the war. Logan's heart sank. An ancient curse. Davis nodded. The battle that took place here wasn't the first. Centuries ago, this land was used for a ritual, a sacrifice of soldiers to appease some kind of entity. Logan swallowed hard. And now, every soldier who dies here is trapped. "We need to find the source," Davis said, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "If we can break the curse, we might be able to escape." Logan and Davis gathered what little supplies they could and set off toward the center of the battlefield. The fog was thick, and the cries of the dead echoed all around them. Logan's heart raced as they moved deeper into the cursed land, the weight of the spirits pressing down on them like a suffocating blanket. Finally, they reached a large, crumbling stone altar, half buried in the earth. The air around it was thick with malevolence, and the ground beneath it was stained with blood, old and new. Logan's breath caught in his throat as he realized this was the source of the curse. This was where the ritual had been performed centuries ago. "We have to destroy it," Davis said, his voice shaking slightly. Logan nodded, but before they could act, a figure appeared in the fog. It was the ghostly form of a soldier, but this one was different. Its face was twisted in rage, and its hollow eyes burned with an unnatural fire. "You do not belong here," the ghost hissed, its voice echoing in the wind. Logan raised his rifle, but the ghost moved too fast. It lunged at Davis, its ghostly hands wrapping around his throat. Davis gasped for air, his face turning pale as the life was drained from him. "No!" Logan screamed, firing his rifle, but it was useless. The bullets passed through the ghost as if it wasn't even there. With a final, desperate cry, Davis collapsed to the ground, his eyes wide and lifeless. The ghost turned its attention to Logan, its mouth twisting into a cruel smile. "You will join us," it whispered slowly. Logan's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away from the altar. He had to act fast. The curse needed to be broken, or he would suffer the same fate as Davis and every soldier who had ever died on this cursed land. In a final desperate move, Logan grabbed a nearby rock and slammed it down onto the altar with all his strength. The stone cracked, and the air around him erupted with a deafening roar. The ground shook violently, and the ghost let out a piercing scream as it disintegrated into nothing. The fog lifted, and the cries of the dead faded into silence. Logan stood alone in the center of the battlefield, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The curse was broken, but the cost had been great.